We start today with a conversation on how AI poses challenges and opportunities for academic freedom. And we are fortunate to have Taina Bucher, who's professor of the Department of Media and Communication at the University of Oslo, and Inge Jonassen, who's head of the Department of Informatics at the University of Bergen. Inge is also a member of the Human Rights Committee of the Academy. So please.
So we're going to start this by a short presentation from my side, and then we'll have a dialogue between the two of us about AI and perspectives related to academic freedom and human rights. Artificial intelligence seems very new on the public scene, but of course it dates back, and Alan Turing, the founder of, or central researcher in the establishment of theoretical computer science, posed the question about whether machines can think already in 1950, and posed what he called the Turing test. So if you had a person who had a conversation with one machine and one person, could he tell which one was the machine and which one was the person? And if the machine passed this, then it would pass the Turing test. So this year, this was passed by GPT-4-5 through a solid empirical study, testing with a number of subjects, and the artificial intelligence being pointed out as the person in more cases than the human in this experiment. So then we must say that the machine has indeed passed the Turing test. So artificial intelligence is here also in the sense of Turing. What is artificial intelligence? Well, a central concept in this is machine learning and supervised learning, where you have data, training data, and labeled with examples, with labels, and you train an algorithm to predict the label on new samples. So I'm not going to go through all of machine learning and AI, but just to agree on what some basic terms here. See, if you have some banking data, previous customers applying for a loan, some of them getting a loan, some of them not getting a loan, you would be able to train a model that would say for new customers whether they should get a loan or not. And of course you depend on having a good set of data, training data, and as we come back to, it should be representative also for future customers, future applicants for loans, if you are going to have a good behavior from this machine. Artificial intelligence is a lot equated with large language models these days. And language models is basically a model that allows you to predict the next word coming in text. So in this case, it's phrased here as probabilities. Strictly speaking, it's not probabilities, but it can be thought of as a statistical model. So the probability of the next word given the previous ones is what matters, and you pick the word that has the highest probability given the previous words. So for example, in this case, it could be democracy that is the most probable word, but it could also be other words depending on what corpus of text it has been trained on. But it's a purely statistical phenomenon. There's no values embedded in the AI as such. It's just based on the training data, how it will behave. So in generative AI, you're given data, you train a model, and then you can use the model to produce new data, produce new text, new images, new video, and so on. And now, I will not go through this, but there was a theoretical article in 2017 that really made a gear shift in large language models, with attention is all you need, which is of course also a good title for a paper. There are of course a lot of pitfalls and challenges. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I already mentioned bias. If you have a biased text corpus collected from the internet, for example, the machine will behave as the average user of the internet, say Reddit or something, and it might be rude and it might be abusive and so on, if that's the data that you train the model on. And if you only trained your banking data on certain type of customers and you have a new type of customer coming in, it may not behave well, and the prejudice that may have existed among the bank employees in giving loan, not giving loan in the past will be carried over by the machine and maybe amplified as well. So, and it's not easy to get a grasp on this. If you have a simple model, you can understand what's going on. If you have two variables, if you have a lot of variables, you need a large neural network typically. There's a lot of weights, and figuring out exactly why the machine has a prejudice or bias against some users and not others is difficult to figure out, and why it comes up with certain behavior in a large language model in the same way. It's not a completely black box, but close to black, so it's difficult to go directly into the machinery once it's trained and adjust that. So it might be hard to interpret and challenging to correct for bias. So typically one uses post hoc procedures, testing the model, adjusting, making filters to catch bad behavior, and cheap labor is often used to do this in context of large language models, which is another aspect of the AI industry. So in the past there has been bad cases, automatic recognition and labeling of pictures where black people have been erroneously labeled. There's been bias in healthcare applications of AI. And when trying to correct for such biases, you can also make other mistakes, like having black Nazis and so on in image generation. Yeah. So this is complicated, and simple post hoc solutions will easily introduce new errors. So what would be better would be to engineer the models in a better way so that they would not produce this kind of behavior at the outset. But AI is also more than large language models and saying who gets a loan and who doesn't get a loan. For example, in molecular biology, you probably all know about this, but I'm making a couple of points related to the topic here. And solving the structure of proteins has been a holy grail. And research into this has taken hundreds of researchers several decades without really making it. And data has been collected in open and reproducible way in the protein data bank, starting with 7 structures in early 70s, and now having more than 240,000 structures. So this gives a very good training data for machine learning. And this is what DeepMind exploited and made a model that outperforms all other automatic or computer-based approaches, and getting close to what you would obtain using X-ray crystallography in terms of precision. So this is a real breakthrough with AI, advancing molecular biology, biomedicine, also biotechnology, and it's a very specialized machine learning approach that required the large amounts of open data to train it, and deep insight not only into AI but also into biophysics, evolution. And that's the point I want to make. We can make new AI that really exploits systematically gathered data, and that can be open and make real advancement in science. And that is also an aspect of AI that I think we should take on board and try to utilize from the academic community. Of course, this was celebrated a lot and also resulted in Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2024, with more general AI getting the one in physics. So there's a lot of opportunities for AI research. In this case, it was a real contribution to advancing molecular biology, biomedicine, and so on. But it can require these tailor-made algorithms, not picking GPT-4.5 off the shelf and using it on some new data. But an important point is that if we want to maintain trust in science, and we do, so that the public will still believe in us and we can help provide the truth basis for the democracy to work in a good way, we need to share also the models and the data used in the AI context. And in academia, we have a special responsibility to promote those practices and develop open models that can be an alternative to the big tech, which has a different objective when developing AI, of course. And I'm also an eager proponent of fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, which also turns out to be fully AI-ready, like the protein structure data. That was shared in a fair fashion long before the concept of fair was invented, and also then enabling AI approaches. So that's my brief introduction, and then Taina will take over.
Good morning, everyone. Let's see, maybe I need this one as well.
Yes. Probably.
Okay, so we also need the humanities and social science scholar to give 2 slides on the notion that AI is, of course, not just a technology. It is a technology, but is much more than that. And I could talk, I have an entire course about this at the University of Oslo, so I won't get more into it. But I want to make 2 points. And I've had some wonderful or not so wonderful help from ChatGPT to make this visualization. But the point here is to say that AI is not a standalone technology. That we need to think about it in terms of social, economic, historical, and cultural entanglements. And also the kinds of stories that we tell about AI, the kinds of stories that shape how we approach policy and regulation and the politics of AI, but also the possible stories and imaginaries for the future. So for me, from my perspective, AI is very much co-constitutive and needs to be thought of in a much larger historical and cultural context. So these are just some of the domains that are not meant to be exhaustive at all. But it basically just goes to show that we need to think about them in terms of social relationships, economic structures. So, for instance, platform companies, monopolies, really. So in the field that I'm coming from, media and communication studies, we've been looking at commercial platforms, big tech, for many, many years, as I'm sure the computer scientists in the room also have. But these new developments in AI with the chatbots and generative AI is very much also commercial enterprise. And of course, the political governance in all of this, the regulatory frameworks, geopolitical competitions, and infrastructure, both material and relationally. So when we talk about AI, it's also important to think about the whole supply chain of the infrastructural power that AI is both conditioned on and conditioned. So everything from mineral earth extraction and the labor conditions under which those takes place, up until what happens at the cloud. And the second thing is also to think about it in time and space, or as temporal, spatial structures. And I was very fascinated by this visualization. I'm not sure if it's good. I will try to explain it. But basically, this is a way of thinking about AI as a river, something that has all of these histories and many more, that sometimes make it ebb and flow in different ways. Did you talk about AI summers and winters? I mean,
not really, but that's
a
part of the history. Yeah.
long history, right?
Yes.
So sometimes we don't care about the stream. Sometimes it's just the water flows very slowly. And sometimes it's a really strong river. And it's been going on for a long time. And it has these spatial powers when we talk about the globe. So these different interests when it comes to AI development, but also all the different kinds of histories or genealogies that might help us think about the politics of AI. And with that, I think I will also jump into the conversation. Oh no, not coffee break, but soon. It's just I don't particularly enjoy slides, but so you can have something to look forward to here. Okay, so we're gathered here today to also talk about AI in terms of human rights and academic freedom. And I'm sure you've already set the scene yesterday and will continue to do so today, but this is also very much for me to ground the conversation. I will reiterate. So the first framework is the human rights framework, emerging after Second World War, designed to safeguard dignity, privacy, and agency. And the second one that is particularly pertinent for us is the idea of academic freedom, which is rooted in, has a long history, of course, with the universities, and later more formally codified into the idea that we are free to do research, teach, and speak truth without fear of reprisal. Both traditions share a common aspiration, the protection of autonomy and the pursuit of truth. And so in all of this, AI, in a way, represents somewhat of a paradoxical force in academia. So on the one hand, I think it is worthwhile also flagging the fact that it has, to a certain extent, democratized, for lack of a better word, or leveled the playing field also for entry into what it means to be part of higher education and academia. So, for instance, the fact that, just using ChatGPT, for instance, to learn, to write, is not only a copy-paste method, but can make it actually relieve people with learning disabilities, for instance, actually help make an inclusive space for learning. But, and I think this is also what we're, why I guess this issue has been put on the agenda for today. It's really also all these challenges that we are faced with and grappling with as members of the Academy. So the kinds of risks and what that means on perhaps a larger scale in terms of how we are to think about freedoms, autonomy, and human rights more broadly. And so some scholars have used this idea of slow violence to think about the kinds of creeping erosions of certain rights and freedoms that AI, and particularly, I have to say, large language models and generative AI, not the molecules. So this is very much a discussion that is rooted in, has its urgency. Perhaps I'm not that fond of the term because everything is so urgent all the time with the ChatGPT. So I thought I could maybe organize my reflection and our discussion, and hopefully also questions from you around 3 topics. Autonomy and agency, which is the first one, and then what this means for knowledge production as the second topic, and then the third, maybe much larger and philosophical, the conceptions of humans, and with it, what does it mean if we think differently about what it means to be a human being? To what extent does this have implications for how we think about the rights of human beings? So at the heart of academic freedom and human rights lies the principle of autonomy, the ability of individuals, citizens and scholars to set their own agenda, to decide and to think and to act. And so in some ways, AI, and of course, with it, algorithmic power and all of these platforms are reshaping the conditions for this autonomy. So on the one hand, it enables access, as I've already said. It can support learners. But the very same tools and techniques and models are also provide perhaps a risk of hollowing out our sense of autonomy that we take maybe for granted. So it's worthwhile mentioning, of course, that AI and algorithms and automation have been used for a long, long time for surveillance. AI-powered monitoring in classrooms, workplaces, and even scholarly communication environments can also then induce some form of self-censorship or make it difficult to know what and when to speak about certain topics. When you know you may be flagged by an algorithm, you arguably start speaking and behaving differently. There's also manipulation. So this is not new with AI or the term AI. These systems are also a continuation of what we've seen for a long time in the commercial internet space, the behavioral targeting of attention and optimization that are also part of nudging users online, right? So the fact that we have this communication infrastructure globally that is based on a business model that is entirely attention and behavioral targeted also feeds into how many of these new companies that are driving the AI and generative AI realm are also thinking about their business models. So when it comes to autonomy, here is also the question of to what extent are we allowing how to interfere with these monopolistic private power structures, the infrastructural layer, of course, as citizens, users, but also as scholars. There is maybe it's a parallel discussion, but to the extent to which we are making ourselves dependent and vulnerable on these big companies for the production of knowledge. So companies like Microsoft being the platform of the university, for instance, which also has a huge stake in OpenAI. But of course also, I mean, not only always doom and gloom, but how can we think about what AI or tools, techniques, what they might also enable. Yeah, so before going to the second topic, I have maybe a question and would like your reflection on that. So from a computer science perspective, how do you think we could design AI, if at all, that are not only invasive in the terms that I just laid out with surveillance, monitoring, and manipulation, but also systems that could actively empower the sense of autonomy, whether scholarly?
This is
It's a very big question.
It's a big question,
Yeah.
and of course we talked beforehand, but this question came up quite late in our discussions. So I didn't really have a lot of time to think about how AI could actively kind of stimulate a feeling of autonomy and promote that. What we have been thinking of, and what is a big activity in the field, is how to better align AI system with societal values, with regulations, with properties that you would like to nourish in a society. But and then in terms of avoiding discrimination, having fair treatment, having transparency in what a decision is based on, and so on. And there's a lot of activity around that. And already that is quite challenging. Then you need to actually spell out and make into equations what it means to be fair. And there are many axes for that, of course. And how to make AI that is explainable and can be communicated to the bank customer that doesn't get a loan, or to a patient that doesn't get a certain treatment. And already that is challenging, but there is work ongoing with that. Another point is that with large language models, the model is designed to give feedback from prompts and from conversations that the user would appreciate, would like. And that could act as an echo chamber, giving more of what you already like, what you already expect. And, similarly to Google ranking of page hits, where you get more of what you liked before and what you clicked on before. It acts in the opposite direction of what we would like in order to have informed citizens forming their own opinion, which would also need different points of view, different perspectives, in at least the way we are used to thinking. But to have, and when the system is eager to please the user, it may also hallucinate, make up facts that would fit into the narrative. So there are efforts to get this better alignment, to avoid the hallucination, to incorporate reasoning and models of the world and literature and so on, to have, and this is improving on large language models, but to go all the way to have a model that would stimulate critical thinking and autonomy, I think we are quite far away from that. But there are kind of work in a similar direction going on quite actively, especially in the academic community, but I think also in the companies. But the companies still have the objective of maximizing profit. Yeah? So we need academic research to go into this, and ideally we would need regulations that is active, and governments that would promote healthy development of the field. But now we have new government in the US affecting a lot of things we talked about yesterday. And also AI, where Trump has said drill, baby, drill. But in terms of AI, he has said build, baby, build. So there shouldn't be any constraints or regulations for American big tech to do AI. And also the new regulations around US companies needing to be transparent towards the government about data that Microsoft is storing for, of course, US customers, but also for us. My university is on Microsoft, as is a lot of companies and government in Norway and elsewhere. So this plays into lot of different aspects that are kind of pulling together in a direction that we may not be so enthusiastic about.
Great. I mean, I have lots more questions, but I think in the interest of time, I'll move on to the second topic of knowledge production, to make sure that we leave ample room for questions at the end. So when it comes to academic freedom, that is basically a defense of knowledge, which might also be changing, or we are faced with what that means in an AI age, in terms of truth and truthiness and the authenticity of information and so forth. So here AI also introduces opportunities and pressures very much for the scholarly field, for the academy. Access to sources helps, or AI also helps automate routine tasks and, as I said, also level the playing field, expanding the circle of participation in knowledge production, as did. We've had very similar discussions with the internet before the platforms arrived and made it into much more commercial space. But then also challenging the very idea of academic integrity, and how we go about producing, or what it means to be a scholar today. It might not be something that we are the most concerned with in the Nordic countries, but in terms of other areas, algorithms and AI have been talked about as the bias in the system. So in terms of admission, who gets to be part of higher education, of hiring, grant allocation, so forth, which is also perhaps at the brink of being amplified in a certain direction. So who gets funding, who gets to be part of higher education is also very much like an algorithmic question today. But beyond sort of the bias that is baked into the training data and the historical bias that we also often attribute to algorithmic systems, maybe there is a larger point to be made about the fundamental change in the epistemological foundation of knowledge production, in terms of also impacting the sorts of questions that we can even ask. The sorts of concepts and words that is part of our work. And here I'm also thinking about the newly forbidden words in the US context, that might also, what happens if these are never typed into or never get part of the training data, if you sort of self-censor, you're afraid of asking different types of questions, or maybe it's not even about the fear to begin with, but you stop asking, you stopped prompting, and so forth. So that's also maybe an issue about if nobody types the word disability in terms of scholarly endeavors, what does that mean? And are we headed into direction more globally? So these are maybe more epistemological foundations when it comes to academic freedom, but also the integrity of scholarship in terms of things like generative AI blurring the lines of authorship. We've had these discussions in the humanities, right? So the death of the author, who is the author, who is the maker of a text, and so forth. What does that mean for us as a scholarly community and knowledge production? And again, the issue of platform power, the fact that increasingly academic conversations are mediated by corporate platforms. How are we to think about the fact that this is basically the infrastructures upon which the apparently objective and truth-seeking knowledge production is taking place? Again, a very large question, but I think you answered the very large question brilliantly before, so I'm sure you can do it now again. So how are we to think about possible technical solutions or political solutions to preserve this integrity, the integrity in academic work when AI tools can generate text, data, and help us think?
It's again a big question, but to take an example from my own field of bioinformatics and computational biology, we have been using, not calling it AI, but effectively AI for a long time to predict properties of genes and so on. For example, in gene ontology, which is a central database and knowledge resource for research across species in molecular biology, you can have annotation of genes saying what does a gene do. And some of this is based on evidence in literature, so which is what you normally trust and should trust. So that is called, then there's an evidence code, that is what I'm getting to. So that's a traceable author statement. This gene does that based on this experiment. But there's also gene annotation based on machine learning or computation. And then there's a different evidence codes. So depending on what you want to use this data for, you can filter out. If you want to train a new machine learning model, you probably don't want to use the already predicted data as a basis for that. But if you want to provide an annotation for a lot of genes, maybe you do. Yeah, so it depends, and then you can filter on that. But in scientific literature, if we get text and articles that is computer generated, coming from ChatGPT or something, it will be more challenging but hopefully we would be able to still identify what is real good work by peer review and so on, and that could be treated in a different way than random text, which should, of course, already be treated in a different way. So I'm not sure how challenging or what kind of issues this will result in for within scholarly work, but it's something to certainly be explored, and maybe some ideas from what is done in my field, and I'm sure also in other fields about labeling data, grading how reliable it is, can be helpful.
Mm. Yeah. Who do you think will do the peer reviewing?
Yeah. So
well, yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully scientists for scientific work.
Yeah, our new peers, the bots. Yes. So I think I also want to make sure to talk about something that really interests me with regards to academic freedom and human rights, is this idea of freedom of thought. So I think we know a lot of things about freedom of expression and other freedoms. And I'm certainly not an expert in this. but I'm very fascinated about the intersection of AI and what that means for freedom of thought. Which in a way, to me, is one of the most unsettling areas when it comes to these discussions. Because I think, so AI challenges not just our practices in these very day-to-day ways, but our very understanding, I would claim, of what it means to be human, what it means to be a human living with something we think about as non-humans, the machines, and how human rights then are understood. And so just to get us or get you into the space of my head, I'm thinking about human rights as a protector of freedoms from interference. So the right to privacy, to free expression, and to think without intrusion, whatever that means. And so here the freedom of thought comes into play. And so when looking into this, I discovered that international human rights law makes a distinction between the internal aspect of the right to freedom of thought, the right to think or believe what you like inside your own mind, and the manifestation of that right. So that those are two different things. The right to freedom of thought and belief, and the right to freedom of opinion are protected absolutely, at least insofar as they stay inside your head. But what I find interesting or unsettling is also the extent to which, this is also an open question, to what extent are AI systems working on or actually acting as a form of mind intrusion, if you want to take it very far, but actually not that far when you consider also the behavioral targeting and the nudging and the creation of a certain kind of informational landscape that we're dealing with. So AI as interfering with some form of inner state, these data patterns allowing AI to infer emotions, preferences, vulnerabilities in ways that we sometimes are not even conscious about ourselves. Again, behavioral targeting and recommender systems are really just designed to predict and nudge choices, maybe even opinions. And over time, are we really seeing some kind of loss of cognitive liberty insofar that maybe our choices, our opinions, thoughts are really shaped by these invisible systems? So how free are we then really to dissent, to imagine alternatives, and to decide on our futures? And I think that this erosion, if it is an erosion, but it's certainly up for debate, and I think it's an important one, is, I think, very subtle. This is something that's going on, and that I also recognize in students, in my informants, when I do interviews with young people. The sort of this subtle power of having something ready to form an opinion with, to think with all the time, so you don't have to. And I can certainly see how it's such an allure when you're 16 and you quarrel with your mother to go and snap AI and just to ask for an opinion. What shall I say? But if you do this all the time, what happens then to freedom of thought? Like, is that actually a form of this intrusion? Yeah. And so this also raises the question whether we also need new categories to think with in terms of rights, of human rights. can we think about not freedom from something, but freedom to be more like active shapers in a positive way? So not necessarily just think about this in purely legal terms, but also a matter of design, right? So you also mentioned like designing social and public values into these systems. And just think about new forms of rights in terms of rights to not be subject to algorithmic manipulation. Is there a right to cognitive liberty? Maybe there is. As I was looking into this, I saw that in France there is a legislation underway that seeks to protect the right to human contact. So in, for instance, healthcare decision. Or also right to be forgotten, the legal principle that allows individuals to request deletion of their personal data. So a breadth maybe of new rights, emerging rights. And so this is especially this more open-ended question about what that means for the implications for freedom of thought. I think is really important. And how can we engage as a community to reimagine AI, to shape AI in such a way that it actually allows for and incorporates and protects the human measure, so to speak. Do you think that is even feasible?
I think this.
Are you hopeful, or
this is a very challenging area for sure. But I think it's really good that you and others from the humanities, social sciences side engage in this. Of course, from the computer science standpoint, we are good at math and theoretical work and to make things work fast and so on, but we need these other perspectives, and also for our students and general population in order to have some understanding of what is going on the technology side. It's not magic, but then also to see how these models are made and what it may mean for you when you get your news from social media instead of from a journal or from some editor steered medium. So at least it's good that we have this kind of dialogue. I'm hopeful. That's the only attitude that I think is meaningful. Be hopeful and optimistic, but it needs work and it needs dialogue. So I'm very happy that there is now a new branch of artificial intelligence research school in Norway, led by you actually, looking into artificial intelligence from the humanistic and social sciences side. We need that together with the more technology-oriented research at Taina. But also for the general public, they need to be aware of how these systems are working. And maybe it's not good to ask the bot every time you quarrel with your mother, or you want to make a political reasoning to choose which party to go for. And maybe there is also what you're talking about is a factor in the tendency that we are seeing in young men and young women going different ways politically, which is, of course, a big question. But technology and these other waves, I think, of course, playing into this, and AI and internet technology is certainly part of that.
Let's take this question into the coffee break, because you really deserve the coffee break now. Okay, but thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.